Greetings and welcome to another impressions video here at Words About Games, and today we're going to be looking at West of Dead. West of Dead is a cover-based twin-stick shooter roguelike that puts you in the shoes of William Mason, a dead man with no memory of his life, trapped in Purgatory, Wyoming in 1888. Something has gone wrong in the afterlife, the dead aren't moving on to heaven or hell, and it seems to have something to do with a preacher that Mason was connected to when he was alive. So he sets off on a mission through Purgatory to try and set things right. Despite the fact that West of Dead is set in the afterlife and is just as much a supernatural fantasy game as anything else, West of Dead is a through and through western, and I love it for it. The husky voice of Ron Perlman narrates over the action with quintessential western dialogue as you make your way through location after location that could have been pulled straight from a classic western movie, albeit with more unnatural monsters and less pistols at dawn. It oozes western from its overwrought yet dramatic dialogue to its setting. Who knew Purgatory was in Wyoming? To the fact that you begin every run waking up on the floor of a saloon bar. Upstream Arcade really nailed the look, feel and atmosphere of a western, which is like catnip to me when done right, and I really wanted to applaud them for that right up front. Plus the soundtrack is understatedly fantastic, the art style is sublime, and Perlman's voiceover is, of course, brilliant. Mechanically, the game borrows a lot of inspiration from Dead Cells. You run through a series of levels, battling monsters and collecting upgraded weapons and items, earning iron to spend on items to help you through an individual run, and sin, which you can spend between levels to unlock new weapons and gear that will be added to the pool of items that you'll be able to find during runs. Then you eventually meet your maker and start all over again. West of Dead was a game that didn't really click for me until I was about an hour in, with a few runs and a couple of unlocked items under my belt. As with most roguelikes, it can take a little bit of time to get your bearings, figuring out the different enemies and how to fight them, and just generally what the game is and what it'll take for you to succeed. There are different weapons and items that will fit your playstyle better than others, enemies that you're going to be good against and enemies you're going to be weak against. You can level up one of 3 stats by finding shrines during runs to increase your health, firearm damage, or item cooldowns. Once everything clicked into place and I knew enough to figure out what weapons and items to look out for during a run, I settled into a nice rhythm of making a little progress before dying, restarting, and then building myself up to make a little more progress. It can feel a little wayward in those early moments as you grab whatever weapons and items you can find that sound cool. But once I was in the groove, I had a pretty enjoyable time with the game. Knowing that West of Dead was a twin-stick shooter, I dove into the game expecting a fast-paced, frantic action game full of hordes of enemies and bullets flying everywhere as I struggled to dodge them. But that's not actually the case. West of Dead is certainly an action-packed game, but thanks to its cover and darkness mechanics, it's a much more tactical, nuanced affair than I expected. I figured if I just kept moving, I'd be fine, like in most other twin sticks I'd played. That was a mistake. The cover system works really well. You run, slide, and crouch between whatever cover you can find as you travel from room to room, which are combat arenas connected via various corridors. As long as you've got some cover between you and an enemy, you're untouchable. You can even aim your weapon and shoot without worrying about getting shot in return. Cover is destructible, so you'll need to keep moving at opportune moments to avoid being caught out in the open. Some of the gunfights, particularly against the outlaw mini-bosses, feel fantastic, whilst also still feeling like you're in an authentically western shootout. The trouble is, for how awesome those shootouts feel, West of Dead tends to favour melee enemies that will rush your position and force you to constantly stay mobile. There are probably more enemies that will try to chew your flaming face off or bash your flaming skull in than try to gun you down. The game's strength lies in its cover and shooting mechanics, and the more I was fighting melee enemies, the less of a good time I was having. This was doubly an issue when gunslingers were mixed in with melee enemies. Trying to stay behind cover to avoid getting shot by gun-wielding enemies, who do not miss unless you pull off a perfectly timed dodge, which you can only use once and most enemies shoot 2 bullets, is a difficult and ultimately frustrating experience. The way aiming works doesn't help. It's a twin-stick shooter, so you move with one analog stick and aim with the other. To help you out in the midst of action-packed combat, however, the game auto-aims at whatever is closest to the direction you're pointing the stick in. which is helpful, sure, but it also makes prioritizing your own targets very difficult. Sometimes you won't be aiming at the enemy right in front of you, but some far-off skeleton. Other times you won't be aiming at an enemy at all, but instead a door or a box full of loot. Despite these frustrations, West of Dead does have a few other things going for it. Each level is very distinct, both in terms of how they look and the types of enemies you'll run across in them. Exploration is a bright spot. There's plenty of new things to find, and paths to optional bosses that you need to defeat to open up new abilities that allow even more exploration off the beaten path. The game also keeps things fresh, even as you explore the first few levels dozens of times over, with the addition of bounties that see you hunting down mini-bosses, or spirits with unfinished business for you to help. West of Dead is a pretty neat roguelike. It's a slower-paced, more strategic action game than its twin-stick shooter nature might suggest, thanks in large parts to its cover mechanics, which can lead to some pretty excellent shootouts. It's also an excellent supernatural western world that's ripe for exploration. There are some frustrations thanks to an iffy aiming system and overabundance of melee enemies. Despite those frustrations, I still had a good time running through the game, and if you've got Game Pass and you like roguelikes, it might be worth a look. Thanks very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, consider sticking around here at Words About Games. Our content includes review impressions of games big and small, a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing the happenings in and around the games industry, weekly opinion videos, reactions, debate-driven top 5 and top 10 lists, a regular Hall of Fame series where we discuss our favourite games, and indie game spotlights. We also stream every Friday and Saturday at twitch.tv/wordsaboutgames. Most importantly, have a brilliant day.